You see, and that brings us to the third thing we see about the greatness in Jesus' kingdom. We see the precedence for greatness in Jesus' kingdom. If you've been here long enough, you know that I love lawyer shows. I think it's fascinating. If I was smarter in another life, I'd try to be a lawyer. It's not happening, but, I can dream, right? And that word precedence is kind of a legal term, right? It's a lawyer term. And what it means is it's the authoritative example. If there's a law that is the precedence in something, it means that it is the authoritative example on which everything else is based or interpreted, right? And so in our passage this morning, we see that God himself is the one who is setting the authoritative example of what it means to be great in his kingdom. You see, he exemplifies the pattern of greatness in his own kingdom. His kingdom is not a just do as they say, not as I do kind of thing. His kingdom is a do as I have done. Do as I have done for you, to you. See, he is characterized by a radical concern for the good of others. Verse 5, he says, he is the one who has welcomed the weak. And so in welcoming them, we welcome him also. In verse 6, we see that he is so seriously concerned about the well-being of the young or the weak in their faith that he severely threatens anyone who tries to trip them up, whether purposefully or accidentally. In verse 10, we see that he has assigned angelic representatives who have direct access to him on behalf of those who are spiritually weak or young in their faith. In verse 14, we see like the prodigal son, that God is a good shepherd who has pursued and rejoiced in the return of wandering sheep. You see, the precedence for greatness in God's kingdom is set by God himself. The one who has stooped to take the humble position of a child for the good of others. You see, in Philippians 2, we see the Apostle Paul points us to Jesus as the ultimate precedence, the ultimate authoritative example of humble greatness in his kingdom. Chapter 2, verse 5 begins this way. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in his appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Later in chapter 2, the Apostle Paul, he sends Timothy to the Philippians and he commends him to them. He says this way, for everyone looks out for their own interests, not those of Jesus. For everyone looks out for their own interests, not those of Jesus. You see, Jesus has looked out for your interests instead of his own. He laid aside his status and his glory and his power and his privilege so that you might have it. He was the highest of all, and he became the lowest of all. He did that out of concern for you, for your good, for your status before him. And so he served you when you were weak, and he pursued you when you are wandering. You see, and when you get that, that changes you. When that clicks in your heart, that fundamentally changes you. See, instead of wanting to pursue greatness, you want to pursue a great humility because you realize that the greatest one of all became humble for you. You see, you begin to respond to that unmerited status as his beloved and adopted child, and you begin to move out into the world in a confident humility. You're confident and full of joy because of your status as a beloved child, and you are full of humility because you realize that you do not deserve that, and you cannot earn it, and even better news of all, you cannot mess it up. And so you are zealously concerned for the good of others, especially those who are weak and wandering. You see, you begin to become a picture of greatness. As you live out in response, as you see the picture of greatness, you respond by living out the pattern of greatness in response to the precedence of greatness for the sake of the only one who is actually great. The one who humbled.